Hello and welcome to Elements of Design, a podcast where I interview design leaders, mentors, influencers, and evangelists and talk to them about their design journey, how to be a better designer, and the future of design in India. I'm your host, Mana Madan, a UX designer based out of New Delhi, India. My guest today is Akshay Verma. Akshay is a lead designer at Obvious. In this episode, I'm going to be having a two-part conversation with him. The first one will be focused on what is interaction design, and the second will be focused on what is design process and why are design processes important. How does design processes help a designer or a design team? So let's welcome Akshay to the show. Hey Akshay, hi, welcome to Elements of Design.
Hi Mana, thanks for having me today.
Thanks for coming to the podcast. Before we start, give us a brief intro about yourself for people who don't know about you.
Yeah, as you said, I work as a designer at Obvious. I lead part of the product design team, and I have a background in interaction design. I went to the school called Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design, and before that, I studied film at NID.
Interaction design to me is designing in a digital platform. That's what my knowledge was until I visited the CIID's website and the projects that the students have done there. There, I think what I found was technology was a very core part of the whole curriculum. I mean, all your projects included a fair share of coding. So the amalgamation of technology and design was happening at CII. So what is interaction design in actual, and how is it defined by industry very differently?
Sure, that's a very good question that you asked. I'm not claiming that I'm an authority on this, but I'll share my views. So there are a bunch of different words that float around, right? There's user experience, there is interaction design, there is human-computer interaction, there is product design. My favorite definition of interaction design is comes from Richard Buchanan, which is that it's about designing how people relate to other people through the mediating influence of products. He's talking about people interacting with other people. And the only role, the very humble role that the product is playing there is in mediating that interaction. That said, the field of interaction design and the way it has evolved is that it's evolved in conjunction with how tech or personal computing was evolving many years ago in the late 70s or the early 80s, and there's that legacy attached to it.
What I see in the history of design, right? We have designers like Dieter Rams. We also have Charles and Ames, like great designers, right? And none of them actually titled themselves as a specific type of designer. Do you think titles for designers are limiting their creativity or innovation skill?
Yeah, again, a topic which is very close to my heart. And the designers you named, of course, I think they're everyone's icons, role models. They are mine as well. I really look up to these people. And it seemed like, they understood design fundamentally, and then the medium was just, a way of getting something done. And it was more about, okay, I have this problem to solve. Now, what is the right medium for it? Rather than saying that, okay, I am a graphic designer or I'm a textile designer, and now I'm going to solve this problem, but I'm only going to restrict myself to graphic design or textile design. That's not the right way of looking at design, in my opinion. And titles, yes, I think titles do limit people quite a lot. They take you away um, from the problem that you're trying to solve, from what your responsibility is. So, for example, even if we were to look at digital product design, a designer's job is not to create an interface. It's to make that product successful. It's to serve the needs of their user, and you do whatever it takes. Sure, design is one of the things that you're doing. You're expected to have expertise in that field, And of course, you are expected to partner with other people who are experts in those other fields, and collectively solve those user needs. But it seems like sometimes we lose sight of that.
I found something on your Twitter which mentioned that you were working on three systems called Signal, Compass, and Reveal. So what are these, and how did you find a need for these?
So it's Signal, Compass, and Treehouse. That's the current name. The names keep changing because all of this is work in progress. But yeah, Signal is essentially a design system, and I know that everybody is making design systems, and there is tons of them out there already. So why did we need to make one ourselves? Well, the answer is that most design systems, it seems, are made for product companies. We are a consultancy. How can we create a design system that can serve the needs of our clients? And how can we create a system that is, infinitely themable, if I may say so? We wanted to create something which was lean enough for our everyday use, and something that we could apply to every project that we do. So that's how Signal started. So these are all built in Figma, and Compass, essentially being a research system, has a bunch of tools and artifacts that you can use. There's like 5 different kinds of maps. There's an empathy map, there's a service blueprint, there's an experience map, there's a journey map, there's an affinity map. So yeah, mostly a ton of artifacts, and then we use these to also conduct our research. And the last system, Treehouse, is essentially a project management system. So it has things like a timer that you can set. If you're collaborating on something, you want to time box it, you can set a timer, and it works fairly well. It has a bunch of votes and super votes, so we can literally run like a remote sprint. In fact, we have been.
Before this podcast, when we had a call, you also mentioned that you love creating processes. It's a two-part question. First of all, why do you love creating processes? And second part is, how do they help?
Good questions. And I'm going to answer the second one first. It's about navigating ambiguity. It's also about eliminating blind spots. And a good process will make you think about everything that needs to be thought about. And it'll force you to go through all the steps. A good process should also, of course, accommodate individual creativity. I think this is a point where, if the mention of the word process makes people very uncomfortable. A lot of times when people hear the word process, they think that it's going to be a recipe. It's going to be, somebody dictating that you do this, and this in this exact order, and this is the only way it can be done. And you'll come up with the solution, and this is what the solution has looked like. And there are lots of really wrong assumptions in there, I think. Why I love creating processes is because there was a time when I was working more or less alone. It's very restrictive because you're only able to do so much. But when you collaborate with other people, it unlocks a crazy amount of potential. And the end product, of course, is greater than the sum of the parts. I like creating processes because it's also part of my job, I think, as a consultant, right? I need to be a facilitator, and I need to know how to get my team from a brief to the final solution. So I need to know what the steps are going to be. And that requires a lot of figuring out. And I really enjoy that. I think it's quite an underrated skill. Facilitation, especially, is not something that most people talk about that often, but it is one of those things that makes or breaks a project.
You have mentioned this twice, that a process is not a recipe. So how do you differentiate between a process and a recipe?
Yeah, excellent question. So I think I'm not going to name, of course, I'm not going to badmouth any specific design companies, agencies, but there are agencies that have like a recipe. They have lots of templates. Regardless of the brief, you tell them that, okay, you want like a website with a landing page for a certain kind of product. They have all the solutions ready. They're going to change the copy. They're going to throw in a new illustration. They're going to make something for you very quickly. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you need to get something out very quickly. So there's a place for that. But on the other hand, if you want to design something well, if you want to really serve the needs of your users, then you need to ask the right questions. Then you need to do a lot of thinking. And a recipe that assumes that the solution is going to be of a certain kind is not going to do the job.
Now, approaching to the end of the podcast, I have two questions for you, very different from the conversation that we are having right now. What do you think is the most underrated and overrated thing about design?
Yeah, I think the most underrated thing about design is that it's 80% project management and 20% design. Design still is looked at this field where there's a bunch of crazy people who sit around, lounge around, waiting for ideas to occur to them. I think it's not really, that's not true at all. If you have to create something good, if you want to produce good design, it will be 80% project management. You are navigating real world constraints. There's a budget, there's a brief, there's a timeline. And if you can't operate within those constraints, then no matter how talented you are, it's not going to help much.
Yeah, and the overrated thing.
Yeah, the most overrated thing, I think, and this is a hard one, but I think designers are quite self-righteous. It actually doesn't bother me that much. At least they are a little bit righteous. They're at least talking about, we are at least talking about ethics and what the right thing to do is. I think we should not forget that we aren't the only ones, and we aren't the experts on that matter, and we should not be too self-righteous in saying that we've got all the solutions to everything. We need to learn to collaborate.
The last question, what I want to ask is, if you still want to share your thoughts on that, is what do you think is the future of design in India?
If you look at what fuels design, it's generally not design itself. That's the hard truth. It's products. It's people innovating, people building new things. That creates a demand for design. And I think a lot of that is happening, and it has more to do with the rise of entrepreneurship than it has to do with the rise of design. I think the future is really bright. There's a lot of people who are coming online for the first time. There's a lot of new products and services and businesses that are coming up. There's a lot of design education that is happening both over the internet and in design schools. And I think it's only going to go up from here.
Thank you, Akshay. Thank you for doing this. It was a lot of fun. Where can people find you on the internet?
Thank you so much, Manav, for having me here. And people can find me on Twitter at, it's a little bit hard, it's _ Akshay Verma _ That's my Twitter handle. And please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, or pretty easy to find on LinkedIn as well. It's Akshay Verma 1.
Cool. So I'll put the social media links in the show notes and description below. And connect with Akshay and have good and in-depth conversation about design.
Thank you so much.
So, cool, man. See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Elements of Design. Links to everything mentioned in the episode will be available in the show notes and YouTube description below. To listen to our previous episode, search for Elements of Design in your favorite podcast app and make sure you hit subscribe. If you like the episode or the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or any podcast app that you're listening to. It will help the show gets discovered, and it would mean a world to me. If you have any feedback, suggestion, or if you just want to say hi, please reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you want. My Instagram is UXANDMORE and my LinkedIn is HelloMan with triple A. So that's all for today. Hope to see you in the next video. And remember, work hard and be nice to people. Chinkwi.